The bitter irony of the Gallipoli campaign of the First World War in 1915 is that the evacuation of Allied troops from the peninsula would go down as the campaign's greatest success. Unlike the tragic waste of life and resources which characterised the operation for 8 arduous months, the meticulously planned evacuation of almost 100,000 men would be almost flawless in its execution. After the failure of the costly August offensive and subsequent attacks at Hill 60 to break the Turkish defences at Suvla and Anzac, British Field Marshal Lord Kitchener arrived at Gallipoli in November 1915 to assess the situation for himself. After touring the sector and observing the hopelessness of the position, Kitchener ordered the evacuation of troops from Suvla and Anzac while recommending that British forces persist with holding onto the Cape Helles sector at the tip of the peninsula. Planning for the evacuation was tasked to Brigadier General Brudenell White, who recommended no further attacks be launched against the Turks and that they should be lulled into the belief that the Allies were settling in for the long haul. To give Turkish observers the impression that it was business as usual, troops were ordered to play games of two-up in areas where they could be observed. Even a cricket match was held on one of the only flat pieces of ground in the Anzac sector, Shell Green. Secrecy was so tight that troops were largely oblivious to the plan until the evacuation was announced on the 11th of December. There was little jubilation at the news, rather stunned realisation at the futility of the sacrifices made. Official war correspondent Charles Bean described the feeling around Anzac. The consideration, which did go straight to every man's heart, was the tragedy of confessing failure after so many and well-loved colleagues gave their lives to the effort. The men hated to leave their dead mates. For a week, tens of thousands of men quietly filed down to the beach under the cover of darkness to board waiting cutters and steamboats, until by midnight on the 18th of December, the Anzac sector was held by only 1,500 men facing off against tens of thousands of oblivious Turks. The small force quietly moved around the trenches, shooting randomly to give the impression of fully manned positions, while the ingeniously designed delayed action drip rifles were rigged to fire long after the defenders had abandoned their posts. From 1 a.m, the tiny rearguard commenced their final trek down to the beach, firstly from the flanks until reaching the centre positions. Pope's Hill and Quinns Post abandoned at 3:15, and finally the Neck at 3:25 a.m. 5 minutes later, 2 mines were blown at the Neck, and subsequent salvos from the Navy ignited stores on the beach. The last man leaving Anzac at 4:10 in the morning of the 18th of December 1915. Sensing something was out of the ordinary, the Turks launched an attack on the Anzac lines at 7:15, but found no resistance, just a network of empty trenches and the graves of thousands of enemy dead left behind. The Turks had successfully defended their homeland, but at an unimaginable cost. As for the Allies, it was estimated that the evacuation would result in chaos with thousands of casualties. Ironically, for the Gallipoli campaign, it was carried out successfully with military precision. Cape Helles was eventually evacuated in January 1916, bringing the campaign to an end.